real Helen Sears this time. I promise. I am the Grants and Operations Manager for Delaware Humanities. I'm the person who is sort of the first A point of contact for all things grant related, and I'm also the first set of eyes on your grant. So I'm the person who decides whether or not it gets passed along for further review, or whether or not you're going to have to go back and make some changes for before it gets passed along to further review. So we thought that it would be useful to twice a year when our big grant cycles open, which I'll get more into in a minute, to have these open grant information sessions where we can talk more about what our grants are, what they can fund, and how to apply for them. So we are going to cover in this info session the following. One, what is Delaware Humanities? Two, what are our grants? Three, what our grants can fund. Four, how to apply for them. Five, some tips and tricks for applying. Six, what the application and budget forms look like. And seven, what are the post-award requirements? So after you are awarded the grant, what do you have to do? That way, everyone is on the same board, kind of the same set of knowledge about what is expected of you and what kind of work goes into having a Delaware Humanities grant. So, jumping right into it, what is Delaware Humanities? So, Delaware Humanities was founded in 1973 as a nonprofit affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, also known as the NEH. The NEH had been founded in 1965 alongside the National Endowment for the Arts as an independent federal agency. So, what this all means is that every year the NEH gives us, Delaware Humanities, a certain amount of money. We use that money for programs and grants. The programming side of Delaware Humanities does our exhibits, our speakers bureau, if you're familiar with that at all, our new community conversations program. It also does our podcast, all of that good stuff. The other set of money comes to grants, which is me. And that is an amount of money that the NEH gives us with the kind of instruction to give it out in grant form to other humanities-based nonprofits in Delaware. Um, so anytime that you get money from a federal agency, it is always considered federal money because their money is federal money. So we have certain rules and regulations that I'll talk about later that come from the fact that our grant money comes from the NEH. We are what is called a pass-through entity, which means money passes through us. Um, so we get a big chunk, split it up into smaller chunks, and we'll get into what those chunks are called, grants, later. So question a lot of people usually have at this point based nonprofits for humanities centric programming. Um, the humanities, by definition, is a very nebulous subject. If you have a good, clean-cut, quick definition of the humanities, we would love to hear it. Sure, sure, so would, and it's true, pretty much everyone else in the field. It is a very nebulous subject, and as a result, has a very long, wordy academic definition from the NEH that you don't have to know about. For our purposes, Delaware Humanities uses this definition. The humanities help us understand human history, culture, and communities. In the humanities, we explore how people have created their world and how they, in turn, have been formed by the world around them. The humanities are critical, speculative, and reflective. They help us understand our lives and the lives of others. So, in short, the humanities are anything that helps us understand ourselves in the context of history, culture, community, belief, and anything that helps us connect to the people around us. And we kind of focus our work through that with other organizations. And with our mission statement, which is we strengthen our communities by connecting Delawareans through the diversity of human experiences. That is what we as an organization are trying to do through our grants and through our programming. Keep this mission statement in mind when we get to the tips and tricks portion at the end of this. It will become relevant. It is always relevant, but it'll become more relevant practically. So now that we are kind of who we are and what we do, getting into what people are primarily here for, our grants. So Delaware Humanities offers types of regular grants. The Opportunity Grant, which is here, and the A&I Grant. So the Opportunity Grant is the most common type of grant that Delaware Humanities gives out. They are awarded on a monthly basis, being awarded the month after you apply for the grant. They are for pretty much usually projects and smaller events, though they can be used for the early research and planning stage for other events that will be larger or take more time. Because of this, they have a maximum award of $5,000. So you can be awarded up to $5,000 with a minimum of $1,000 for a request. Um, and they have a one-to-one cost share match. So a cost share match is essentially for every dollar of Delaware Humanities funding that you request, you are able to put up a dollar of either cash or in-kind contribution. Cash is exactly what it says on the tin. It is for every dollar of Delaware Humanities funding, you have a dollar of cash from your own organization or from donors or from non-federal some other non-federal grant or non-federal gift money. It can't be federal because our money is federal and you can't match federal money with federal money. They won't let you do it. And when I say they, I do mean the NEH. That's usually when I say they won't let you do it. It's the NEH won't let us do it. The other one that is less clear is in-kind matches. In-kind matches are anything that has value that uh, is not money, is not currency. So an in-kind match would be things like volunteer hours, things like donated space, donated time. If your organization is using a space that is normally rented out, but you choose to waive that, but you are not renting it to yourselves, you are holding it in a space that is normally rented out, then you would be able to count that rental fee as cost share because you are foregoing the amount of money you would make by renting that space out for using it for yourself. That is the same for if you have a speaker who is waiving their honorarium. What their honorarium would be is considered in-kind cost share. Or in some cases, if you're like hiring a production company to film a documentary and they give you a nonprofit discount, the difference between the nonprofit discounted rate and their normal rate is considered an in-kind contribution because it is money that they are foregoing, and it is effectively a donation to your organization. Um, Before I carry on with the opportunity grants, is there any questions about cost share or in kind, what in kind can be? Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, drop it in the chat. If not, perfect. I know in kind is kind of the stickiest one, and a lot of people get kind of scared by the idea that they would have to have a cost share match, but we try to make cost share matches as easy as possible, especially through things like salaries and, oh, looks like we might have a question. Is it possible to have all of those examples written out? I would be happy to provide, when I send a follow-up email, I'd be happy to provide a kind of a list of examples of what cost share could be. It is a very tremendous list. Um, the big ones that a lot of people end up using are salaries or volunteer hours. So volunteer hours get counted as in kind for cost share at a rate of about $30 an hour. So for every, hour of volunteer time, it is considered, $30 of in-kind cost share. Salaries are counted as cash. So if you are working for an organization and you are paid to be there, and you are paid to be working on this event, the percentage of your salary that you are being paid to work on this is counted as cash for cost share match. We try to make it as easy as possible for you to make that cost share. Um, And if you have any like questions specifically about how to make cost share, or you're worried you won't make the cost share, please just reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to help you find places where you can get that cost share. Um, so other requirements for the opportunity grants, you do have to be a nonprofit organization. However, you do not have to be a tax exempt nonprofit. So you do not have to be a registered 501(c)(3). You just have to have what is called a unique entity identifier, or a UEI. We have some instructions on how to get them, but they are available for free through sam.gov. Um, Most grant-making organizations that offer grants made out of federal money will require you have a UEI. And we are one of them. So the next big thing for opportunity grants is the period of performance. Now, the period of performance is effectively a fancy word for duration. It is the time period in which all of the money has to be used and the project has to, at least the project portion that Delaware Humanities is paying for, has to be completed. It is the period through which the performance must take place, which makes it sound way more artsy than it is. But the duration of an opportunity grant is 6 months. So that is not 6 months from application, that is 6 months from award. So if you apply in October, that doesn't mean that the period performance would start in October. It means it would start in November when it was awarded, because all opportunity grants are awarded the month after you apply. Don't worry, I will go through this example in just a minute and we'll go through what that means. So, um, opportunity grants are usually used for like smaller events, for weekend or day-long events, or kind of small-scale digitization or recording projects. We recently granted opportunity grants to, we granted one to the Nanakoke Indian Association for their powwow. We granted one to the University of Delaware for effectively a summer-long project to map Black entrepreneurship in Civil War era Wilmington. They got some money for that from an opportunity grant. It's things like that. We've given opportunity grants for making like small oral history digitizations for exhibits, things like that. Um, so to kind of simplify it, going through this example over here, what does it mean to have this 6-month period of performance? When would you have to apply? All of that good stuff. So it's important to note that one of the things Delaware Humanities cannot fund is what is called pre-award costs. Pre-award costs are pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. It's any cost that happened before the award was given out, any cost that was incurred before the award was given out. Um, so that means that if you have an event that is in January, but you want to start paying for locations, paying for travel, paying for printing in December, you would have to apply as such so that your grant would be active in December, if that makes sense. So this is the little example that I like to have. Say you are hosting a lecture series that starts in January and runs January, February, April. It is a 3-month kind of lecture series. You're having 2 people per month come to your library to give a lecture. Um, you want to start paying for locations. You want to start like getting travel and hotel rooms in December for your speakers. So if you want to start paying for things in December, that means that your grant period of performance would have to start December 1st, even though your event isn't until January. So because the grant review period is a month long, you would have to apply in October. So you would apply by the end of October. Your grant would be reviewed in November and then awarded the last day of November, usually the last Thursday in November, to begin on December 1st. And starting December 1st, you can pay for travel, you can pay for locations, you can pay speaker honorariums, and the only stipulation then is that everything has to be completed 6 months after that. So by May 31st, your period of performance would end, which is 6 months after December 1st. Um, 6 months after December 1st. The period of performance ending means that your project has to be over. We can't pay for anything that occurs after that date. And after that, you will have some follow-up paperwork due, which we'll get to kind of at the end of this, going through it step by step. Um, are there any questions about opportunity grants and the timeline for those? Feel free to again unmute, raise a hand, put something in the chat. There's many ways you can ask your questions. I promise I don't bite. All right. So if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or to kind of ask them. I'm more than happy to answer them at any point. Um, can use it for item supplies and equipment. It depends. So items and supplies, yes. There is a section on here that has huge lists of everything we can use for everything you can use your funding for. Item and supplies, yes. Equipment, it gets a little bit sticky and a little bit difficult. But I will get more into that in a second. Um, the last thing I want to say about opportunity grants before I move on is the only requirement we have is that you have to apply no fewer than 90 days before the first day of your event. So if your event is on January 15th, you have to apply by October 15th. This is because we have certain requirements for promotional materials, and that you have to say thank you to us on your uh, printed materials and things like that, and have our logo on printed materials, as well as the NEH's logo, because that's how we get our advertisement, and all of that stuff. So we do require a 90-day kind of notice on that, so to speak. If your event is happening like, say it's happening January 20th, and you realize, oh no, I can't get my grant in until October 21st. There's a little bit of wiggle room if you tell me in advance that you will be applying it, knowing that it's a little bit like it's 80 days out, so to speak. There's a little bit of wiggle room as long as you communicate it with me. The key there is communicating it with me. Again, I promise I don't bite. My communication information, my email will be at the end of this. We try to be as flexible as possible within reason with organizations. Because we try to reach a lot of small organizations and a lot of organizations that maybe haven't applied for grants before. So we try to be as approachable and unscary as possible, hence these information sessions. So this is the most regular grant, our opportunity grant. We are now going to move on into the bigger grant, the big scary one. Scary. The Action Innovation Grant. So the Action Innovation Grant is for more fleshed out and planned projects. It has a maximum award amount of $20,000, which is increased as of this year. It used to be $18,000 for those of you playing along at home. Um, it has been increased this year to reflect kind of the rising costs of everything and inflation, and to make sure that we're keeping up with the needs of organizations. It also has a one-to-one cost share match, which might seem a little bit more onerous than the $5,000 cost share match. But like I said, we do everything in our power to make sure that you are able to make that cost share match. A lot of times it will be met through volunteer hours or through kind of salary contributions and things like that. So, unlike the Opportunity Grant, you must be a, registered nonprofit in good standing. So this we learn whether or not you're in good standing through a charity check, and also one of the first things we ask you to submit is the most recent copy of your 990 for your organization. Um, there are a couple of exceptions to that. One is if you are an agency within the state of Delaware and you don't have to file a 990 because you are the state of Delaware. Um, there are letters that you can get from the IRS saying, promising that they don't have to file a 990, which is why they don't have one. Or if you have just registered, we once had an organization who had gotten their 501(c)(3) registration like 3 months before they submitted their application, and they simply hadn't had to file a 990 yet because they had only been an organization for 3 months. Um, so usually in that situation, there's something we can work out. Um, that being said, if you do not fall in those very specific categories, you will have to submit the most recent copy of your 990. Um, the Action Innovation Grant cycle is also a lot longer than the Opportunity Grant cycle. It is open twice a year, once in the spring and once in the summer, and then it is awarded twice a year, once in the spring and once in the summer. It is a very long process from end to end. So it starts with the submission of an LOI, which is called a letter of inquiry. The LOI is not an actual letter. You don't have to write a full paged out letter to us. Um, it is a form on our grant management software that asks for your unique entity identifier number, your UEI, or just an acknowledgement that you are applying for one. Um, it asks for a copy of your 990. It asks for the title of your project, a description of your project, and then at the end of it, it makes you schedule a 45-minute long phone or Teams meeting with me to discuss your project. Um, this is because at that stage, we find it very useful to have a dialogue back and forth about what your project entails, what you're going to be doing, who your audience is. Um, and it helps me get an understanding of what you're planning to do, and it helps you kind of practice what information you're trying to get across. So when we ask these questions again in your application, you kind of know what to say and you know what we're looking for. Like I said, we try to make this as easy and comfortable a process for grantees as possible. So having that open dialogue is very important to us. Again, it's a 45-minute meeting with me. I don't think I'm very scary, so I don't think people should feel particularly worried about that, but it can be over the phone, it can be over Zoom. So we do have an LOI that is currently open. It opened on September 13th and will close on November 21st. Um, it is a requirement for the Action Innovation Grant that you submit the LOI first. So after the LOI is submitted, once that closes, there is an invitation to apply that goes out. So then you'll have to go through the full application system. The invitations to apply this cycle will go out December 12th. And you will have from December 12th to January 23rd to fill out the application. The application is not tremendously long. It's about as long as the Opportunity Grant application. There are, a couple more questions, a couple more kind of specifics, but by that point, we hope that we have had enough communication that you know what we need. The next aspect of it is the review period. So Action Innovation grants are reviewed in 3 stages because they are for so much money. The first stage is me, who does your a risk assessment, making sure you're a nonprofit, making sure that everything seems good and that we're fundable on as many aspects as we can. And once it passes through me, it goes to our external review team. So our external review team is a group of professionals who have experience in the nonprofit world from or in the humanities fields, really, from various different locations and various different backgrounds. 3 of them are assigned per grant, and they look at your application. They give me any questions they have. I ask you the questions, you give me the answers, I give them the answers to make sure they remain as unbiased as possible. Afterwards, I meet with all of them and we discuss your grant application and what they think should be done with it. As an unbiased source that is just looking at it for the first time, as opposed to me, who's been talking to you about it the whole time. Um, Once it passes through that external review period, I take all of the feedback from the external reviewers, I take all of the staff feedback, and we bring it to our program and grants committee of our board of directors. From there, the board of that committee decides whether or not they think things should be funded, and then it finally goes to our board of directors to vote. They vote during the spring board meeting and during the fall board meeting, is for the two different cycles of this grant. So for this example of the one that's currently open, our review period would be between February and April, and during the April board meeting, the board of directors would vote. So by the end of April is then when the grant would be awarded. So if you've noticed, because the period of performance would start May 1st, 2025, and the or the Action Innovation LOI is currently open, that is a 7.5 month long process just to go from LOI to period of performance beginning. It is a long review process. It is a long, long process, which is why we ask that these are for projects that are fleshed out and planned, because we are asking you to tell us what you want to do 7.5 months in advance. Um, a good example of the action innovation grants that have been funded recently. We funded the local journalism initiatives debates. There were two debates, the governor one, and I believe it was the House of Representatives debate, as well as their voter guide. We are funding the Delaware Public Media's election coverage. We have funded a symposium last year with the Todd Morton Foundation on the Bancroft brothers. What else? They all blur together. Oh, documentaries are another very popular one. We funded the Blue Hen Records documentary at the Greater Harrington Historical Society. Things like that are stuff that is planned, a year in advance that needs the funding to kind of go through. So this means after the first application, 7.5 months later, the period of performance would begin and Delaware Humanities funding can be used. Um, Now, the period of performance for Action Innovation grants, another reason why it's for A, so much money, and B, so planned out, is it has a year-long period of performance. It'll run this time from May 1st, 2025 till April 31st, 2026, which feels like a year that doesn't exist. But till 2026. So these are for large symposiums, for kind of final stages of larger projects, for year-long projects, for documentaries, things that need a lot of time and a lot of money. So that is the A&I grant in a nutshell. Are there any questions on either of them, on anything?
Helen, I have a
Yeah.
quick question. This is Edgar at Children and Families First. And I think I believe I understand, but just want to make sure. So, for example, if I have a project that I'm already in planning, right, and
Mhm.
hasn't really necessarily kicked off, but or let's say it has, but we
Mhm.
need more funding to kind of push that project forward and finish
Mhm.
it. Would this be something that we could try to apply for this funding source?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
If you have like started projects and started planning them, so long as what you're looking for the funding to fund, that money wouldn't be spent until the period of performance begins. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if the project has already started, or if you have done a lot of the planning for it already, you can absolutely apply for funding to kind of keep it going. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, we have done that in the past for programs that are active and ongoing, where organizations will apply and be like, yeah, we had funding from this grant before, but it's running out and we want to keep doing it. So now we're looking for different ventures.
Got
Uh,
it.
the longer it's been planned and the longer it's been ongoing is also usually a very it's a good thing for the reviewers to be looking at, because then they have they know it works, basically.
Perfect. Perfect.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, great.
That's good.
Can funds be used to pay a grant writer or manager, or does it have to be volunteer work to be counted as a match? Um, so funds can't actually be used to pay your staff. So if you are trying to hire a staff member or pay a staff member, the only time grant funding can be used to pay an individual is in very specific circumstances. I'm actually gonna zip real quick just over one and then I'll go back to the other one for this. But for funding costs, we can't fund things like salary costs, but we can fund humanities scholars coming to speak at organizations. We can fund honorariums. And we can also pay for a researcher if you are doing very specific research and if this research is going to be made public afterwards. If you are hiring somebody like to consult, or if you're hiring somebody to do like research on a particular subject, like one of the things we funded for that Black entrepreneurship grant for UD was they had a summer intern and we gave them a little bit of money for the summer intern to do this research. Um, so things like that can be funded, but not things, unfortunately, like a grant writer or a manager unless they are a contractor for this specifically and they're working on this grant specifically. Um, but oops. So I hope that answers your question. Um, but while I'm here, we're going to talk about the costs real quick, because that seems to be a very important question. Um, so when we're talking about things that can or can't be funded, we can fund things that are considered integral or important program and implementation costs. So this is things like technical costs, humanities, scholars, facilitators, any kind of domestic travel. We can't fund international travel, or per diem costs, supplies, promotional materials or printing materials. We can pay for people to come speak to your event. We can pay for them to fly in. We can pay for them to eat. We can pay for you to print your flyers. We can pay for you to rent a room. We can pay for you to rent some tables. Um, Really, the list of things that we can fund is very, very long. So sometimes it's easier for us to look at things that are not fundable. So we can't fund things like your operating or salary costs, unfortunately, but salary costs are cost share. We can't fund scholarly programs or competitive regranting or competitive awards like scholarships, because unfortunately, if you give us, because we are a pass-through organization, we can't give money to other pass-through organizations. And yes, don't worry, Joelle, I will give you a copy of these slides afterwards. Oh gosh, there we go. I will be sending out a follow-up email after this with my slideshow, any other additional information. I know, I believe it was Abigail asked for a list of what counts as cost share, or in kind versus cash. I'd be happy to provide any of that. If there is any additional material that you guys would like from me in that follow-up email, please just let me know. I'd be happy to provide it. Um, so other things that we kind of can't fund are things like international travel. We can't pay for you to buy property, to like purchase property. We can't pay for lobbying. We can't pay for alcohol and entertainment. This is all stuff that comes from the NEH and things that the NEH effectively says that we cannot fund. One of the other big ones is preserving or organizing inaccessible materials. So inaccessible materials in this sense is anything that once you are done with it, nobody else can see. It is only for your organization's eyes. Everything has to be public in some sense, because we are for the people of Delaware. We can preserve and organize accessible materials. So if you have an archive that you want to open to the public that is an absolute mess, like many archives are, and you need to have some people reorganize it, and you need to buy some things, and you need to organize them. If anybody is familiar with the University of Delaware's C-Aid, or it used to be called Collection SWAT when I was at the University of Delaware. where they have a bunch of grad students come in and organize materials and things like that. We have funded them in the past, and given them kind of grant money for that in the past. That is considered preserving or organizing accessible materials. So do you have any questions about what costs are fundable or unfundable is kind of the big one? Again, it's always easier to look at a list of things you can't do than a list of things you can do. Right. Wonderful. I always use these points to take a little drink of my water. So, all right. Going back one, before I go forward too. Funding in terms of projects. So, okay, what can be funded? What can these grants be used for? These grants can be used for things like documentaries, things like lectures, or digitization efforts. Again, the list is really long of what can be funded. But what can't be funded are things that are usually considered more artistic ventures. So plays, creative writing, listening tours, um, anything that is considered either A, not humanities based, or B, more rooted in the arts than the humanities is unfortunately non-fundable. So we can fund things like the interpretation of arts, so an art history lecture, or a lecture where people are discussing like Shakespeare or something like that, but we can't fund the production of a Shakespeare play, or we can't fund the production of arts. The production versus interpretation is kind of where we draw the line for humanities versus the arts. And for things like listening tours or focus groups, that is considered what would be over here as non-humanities social sciences, where yes, that information might be used to create a humanity-centric project, but the collection of it is not considered rooted in the humanities. Um, what groups are eligible for funding? Anyone who is a nonprofit group, really. So K through 12 schools, universities and colleges, museums, historical societies, libraries, state and government agencies, and any kind of nonprofit group like social or professional organizations, community or religious groups, etc. No organization is too small to request funding from Delaware Humanities. That is a point that I always love to hammer home. No one is too small to get funding from us. We love funding small organizations. It does not matter if you have one employee and they are a volunteer. um, we love funding organizations. It doesn't matter if your annual budget's $50. Um, Nobody is too small to apply for a Delaware Humanities grant. Funding small local organizations is part of what we do because the work that these organizations are doing for their communities is important, and we want to fund people who are doing important things like this. Um, and I will pop briefly off of my soapbox for small organizations and how important they are to our communities. But do not feel like your organization is too small for a grant. Do not feel like you are too small to apply for anything, or because you've never applied for anything before that you can't do it. We try to be as accessible as possible. So on that note, zooming past this, grant tips and tricks. So grant application tips and tricks. How do you apply for one of these is one thing. How do you get one of these is always another thing. So I have kind of five of the most important things that I look for when I am reading a grant application because I am the first person reading your grant application. So what I am looking for when I'm reading your grant is these five things. Number one is answer the whole question. If the question has two parts to it, make sure you are answering both parts. If there is a little like, if there's bullet points under each question, make sure you answer every part of the question. If it says, what audience do you want to reach and how do you reach that audience, make sure you're answering all of it. We try to make it so that as few questions as possible have multiple parts, but on questions that do have multiple parts, making sure you take the time to read the entire question and making sure you take the time to respond to the entire question is extremely important in understanding uh, what you are doing and how you plan to accomplish that. As me, the person reading the grant application. The second most important tip that I can offer you is to focus on how your project reflects the humanities. So, the humanities are the vital core of everything that Delaware Humanities does. And the thing that we want to know most of all is what is the humanities core of your project? What is the central part of the humanities from your project? Um, and one of the things that I think is very good when people do it is when they just come out and tell me immediately and they say, you know, we are doing this. If you're having a lecture series, you can say, you know, this lecture is on this specific historical aspect, and the humanities are evident in, you know, this portion of it. Making sure your grant application is clear is another very important part of it. I will gladly read an answer 7 times to try to parse through what you mean, but I would rather not. So making sure you are clear and forthright with what you are saying is very important when it comes to writing these answers. Um, it also makes it a lot easier if people are kind of glancing through them to make sure they understand the core of what you're saying. Um, so the third trick is writing about the strengths of your project and the strength of the connection to the humanities. This really goes along with the second tip, but making sure you're talking about how your project is connected to the humanities and how your project is going to influence your community and how your project is going to kind of further that strength and or further that connection to the humanities. It is great knowing what your project is, but we also want to know what your project does and will do. Um, I hate to say like, what is the point of your project? But it is kind of one of those making sure you know what the point of your project is, what you are trying to do with it. Um, we have some questions on there about your goals and your outcomes and making sure you are clear about what you want your project to do. What do you want people to take away from it? And that is something I think is very important when it comes to approaching grant applications, is knowing if your participants, if people who come to your event or people who use your program or people who use your digitization, your digitized collections, if they were to come away with one thing, what would you want them to come away with? What would you want them to bring home to their families, to their friends, to their community? Um, and how are you trying to get that through to them? That is one important aspect that I think uh, when it is clear in a grant application, it is very notable and it is very good to have. The fourth point is to talk about what you're using the funding for or what Delaware Humanities will be funding for your project. This one is more of a uh, because we have so many rules passed down from the NEH, it is very important to us to know what we are funding and to know exactly where our money is going at any given point. Um, so being very clear about what your funding is for and being very clear about what you want your funding to pay for will only be helpful. Um, some people tend to worry that if they ask for the full amount and they say, you know, specifically what they're using it for, if maybe it's like a little too clinical, it's not. The more that clear you are about how much money is going where, the easier life is for me, and for all of us here at Delaware Humanities, and for you, because otherwise I'm gonna have to email you asking you what you mean. So nobody wants more emails. So these are really ways that you can save yourselves from receiving emails from me. Um, and the last quick tip and trick I have for you is discussing the communities who will be served and what these communities will be getting out of your program or project. So like I said, this is the one thing you would have them walk away from. And who do you expect to come to these? And I know sometimes it's easy to say, well, I expect, you know, Delaware citizens to come to this. To think specifically about who you are targeting, about who will be benefiting from this, who is most likely to come to this, and what will they be getting out of it? Or what do you hope they will be getting out of it? Um, as an organization, Delaware Humanities, we focus on helping organizations support their communities and reach their communities and really reach the people around them. So we want to know what communities you're trying to serve um, and who will be getting something out of your program and who will be getting something out of your project, and most importantly, what will they be getting out of it? So that kind of one thing that they would be able to take away from it. What is the one thing that you hope will have a lasting impact on the community from your program or from your project? Um, these are kind of my 5 tips and tricks. Um, and again, if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to raise your little hand, anything you want. But zipping along quickly, how to apply for an opportunity grant, the technical aspect of it. We're going to be looking at 2 forms, the actual live application, so what it looks like. It's not a secret. You can go on Found It and look at it right now. I think it's on our website too. So how to apply. So first you would apply for a UEI on sam.gov if you don't already have one. It can take a couple months to receive one, so make sure you do that as soon as possible if you don't already have one. It's also been taking a couple months to renew it. If your organization had one and it expired, it's been taking a couple months for people to get it renewed and restarted. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to make an account on Foundant. Foundant is our grant management software. Um, so there on our website, there's an application process section, and there is a link there. There is also on the upper right-hand corner of our website a series of buttons. There's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. I think that's SoundCloud. And then on the far right, it'll have a donate button. This little T with the red and black square that I have circled here, that will take you directly to Found It if you click on it. Um, Anywhere on the website, if you see this little T and you're trying to go to Found It, it'll take you there. Don't ask me why it's a T. I don't know. But this little square will take you there. And from there, you are able to make an account. If your organization already has an account, um, and you don't know the password to it, you can use the password reset button, or you can ask me if you have an account, and I can go in and I can basically attach you to an account so you don't accidentally make duplicates and then make me have to merge them later on the back end. Um, but if that happens, it's no big deal. So that's Found It in a UEI. So time for the very exciting portion of it. I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to start resharing once I have it open. Um, there it is. Okay. Here we go. All right, are we all looking at a PDF?
Yeah.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. Um, Sometimes it likes to share the, oh no. There we go. Now we're all looking at a rotating PDF. So this is what the actual application looks like when it doesn't have all of the boxes underneath it. When you actually look at it in Found It, it'll have text boxes for you to type directly into the application. You don't have to print anything out. You do not have to mail anything in. Everything is done on Found It. You type it in, it's good to go. So this whole first section is UEI, so the Unique Entity Identifier. If you do not have one of these, we cannot give you money, which is why it is so prominent. And as this says, it is free to receive and renew, and they will never charge a fee. If anybody ever emails you saying that they have to have a payment for a renewal, it is not legitimate. You are being scammed. It will not result in your UEI being renewed. There are some quick start guides and instructions on the application itself that it'll link you to help you. Also, if you need any help, you can email me and let me know. So the only thing on this first page that isn't about the UEI is your organization volunteer run? a lot of these organization questions are really centered on finding out what size your organization is, so that we can know for our own demographics and so that we can know for what is called our risk assessment. The risk assessment is just how risky a grantee are you? If you are a risky grantee, that by no means would ever put you in a position where you are less likely to receive a grant. It just means that we have more rules that we have to follow as an organization to make sure that all of our rules are being followed. It means that for an opportunity grant, you would only be able to receive 90% of the funding up front and the last 10% of the funding after the program is done. And it also means you have to have an external evaluator, which is someone from the organization comes and watches your program. Super easy, super chill. Sometimes I go to grantee events just for fun, to see how they went. I went to one last night. It was great. Um, so the next question is your annual budget. This is just, how much money does your organization have in a year? The institution type. Again, a lot of these questions are for our own data, for our own evaluation, because we like to see a diversity in the institution types. We like to see a diversity in location. We like to see a diversity across the state to make sure that we're not just funding museums who are putting on exhibits, but to make sure that we are reaching a greater audience and greater, communities. So, the next question, which is a new one, is to enter the mission or vision statement for your organization. This is just to give us a better idea as to who your organization is and what you do. Um, Again, demographic question. Are you a first-time applicant? And how did you hear about us? Because we were always curious how people heard about us. Um, you'd be surprised the wild answers I get to this. Some of them are just, I Googled grants. Which, you know what? Great. Um, the kind of nitty-grittier stuff is the project overview and later project details. Project title, exactly what it says on the tin. What is your project called? Project overview. So this is like the quick, snappy elevator pitch for your project. If you had 100 words or less, if you had 10 seconds or less in an elevator to explain your project to somebody, what would you say? It's like a short description you would use on a website or a calendar event. This is your first place to kind of pitch us on what you're doing, and who you are. So you should include humanities contents, activities, and objectives, program partners and their roles. So if you're working with a library, if you're working with a museum, if you're working with somebody else, tell us who you're working with and what they're doing. It is going to be quick. It is going to be easy. There are places for you to extrapolate more later. This is the amount you requested. Again, between $1,000 and $5,000. If you enter something more than $5,000, I will revert it to a draft and I will ask you to fix it. Because why would you? You can't be that sly. It won't work. So next is the project completion date. So this is just where you would enter. When do you expect your project to be over? Um, it cannot be outside of the period of performance for an opportunity grant that is 6 months. It also can't be within 90 days of your application. So this is just when we get a general idea of when your stuff is over. Number of events, date of events. It's just if it has events, when are they? How many are they? Will admission be charged? We generally speaking like our grant funded activities to be free. However, we understand that sometimes there is a fee associated. Please know that the NEH does require that if a grant funded activity costs money or requires a charge, that for low income individuals, there is a free option, or an option to access the information for free at a later date. This can be that, yes, there was a fee to go to it live, but it was recorded and posted online for free, if it's like a symposium or a lecture. So that is something to keep in mind, and that's kind of why we ask this question. Admission cost, how much is it? If you are charging like $45 per person and you're expecting, 500 people to go to an event, we might be asking, why are you requesting $5,000 from us? And also, why does it cost so much? So that's kind of why we ask the admission cost. If unknown at this time, please estimate. So project location, if it's somewhere other than your location, where is it? Um, and county, this is again, the county and project type slash activity is just for A, demographics, and B, to make sure that we are getting a diversity of locations and a diversity of project types. Project types they're all listed down here. It's lectures, festivals, documentaries, podcasts, magazines, oral history, other media products slash publications, digital humanity activities, preservation projects, things like that. And then other. So, where you get to be more detailed about what you're doing is here for project details. So project activities and timelines is what specific activities will this subaward fund? If you are doing a big weekend-long event and all you want is Delaware Humanities to cover the speaker fees for your speakers to come in, this is where you will tell us what activities are going to be done. So what humanities speaker are you bringing in? What are they going to be talking about? For your lecture series, what are the lectures going to be on? When are they going to be happening? And what's going to be happening at them? This is where you get kind of pretty specific about what you're doing. And what is the month-by-month timeline for this project from planning to execution? So this is where you can tell us what you have already done. So are, you know, if you have an event in September and you applied in July, or you applied in June, you can say like, oh, we started doing research in April, and May. And then in June, we started planning. In July, we were contacting panelists. In August, we are going to start publicizing. And in September is when the actual event is. So the actual activity dates and things that are being funded must occur after the period of performance has started. The period of performance for an opportunity grant is 6 months. We do kind of prefer if you keep it within a 3-month time span, because if it's a full 6 months, sometimes it can get a little unwieldy for people, but it is 6 months. The next question is the project humanities content. This is when you get nitty-gritty about how your project aligns with the humanities. Like I said in the grant writing tips and tricks, it is super important for us to see how your project furthers the goal of the humanities in the state and kind of pushes the humanities forward in the state. Um, this is where you get nitty and gritty on it. This is where you tell me, how does it align with the humanities? And most importantly, remember what I said about the mission statement becoming practical? How do they align with Delaware Humanities mission? So how does it help connect Delawareans through the diversity of human experiences? Um, so how does it do all of those things? Um, the second portion of the question is to explain why there's a need for this project and if awarded, how it will meet this need. So this is kind of the why does it matter that I don't like asking, but like saying it like that, but it is important. Why does this project need to exist? Why do you have to do this project? What need is there for a lecture series or a symposium or a festival or an exhibit or a digitization effort? Why does your project need to exist? And if it is awarded, how will this project meet the need? So if there is, a lack of Black history in your community and you are doing a Black history podcast, that is where you are filling a need. There is a lack, there's something that is missing. There is an aspect of connection to a community that your organization noticed was gone and is trying to fill. So that's where you would explain it, is in the Project Humanities content. Um, and the next question is project objectives, which is what are the objectives? So, oh look, there's another one of me. Um, so what are the project objectives? What are the goals that you are trying to accomplish through this project? Um, this is, like I said in the tips and tricks section, this is if they were to take one thing away from your project, one thing away from attending, what would it be? What would happen? What is the objective? What are you hoping to accomplish? And how do these objectives further the goals of your organization? So we have you put your mission statement here on the the top part of the application, but this question is just asking how do the objectives and how do the goals of this project kind of further the goals of your organization? How does it work with your mission statement? Um, the next big one is project evaluation. So, based on all the stuff you put here, how do you know that you succeeded? It is one thing to say we want to change the world, and that is a great goal, but how do you measure success? Um, are you going to be giving a survey at the end of your documentary screening? Are you going to be sending a follow-up email? Are you going to have a pen and paper survey around there? Are you measuring based on the amount of people that show up? Are you measuring based on the amount of people that interact in a Q&A afterwards? Those are all valid forms of project evaluation, and we would love to know kind of what the specific methods are you are using to measure success. Especially this is where you would write that, you have a meeting afterwards to go over how it went and go over how it can be changed. Um, the next question is promotional strategy and audience. Remember when I said make sure that you talk about your community and how you are connecting to your community? This is where you would do that as well. So please describe your targeted audience and how you will publicize this project to attract the target audience. So we also ask you to note if the targeted audience is a historically marginalized community, because part of our goals as an organization is to help uplift organizations either run by or who are supporting these historically marginalized and underrepresented communities, which includes but is not limited to rural communities, ethnic minorities, LGBTQIA plus communities, active military and veterans, senior citizens, women, low-income individuals, incarcerated individuals, and individuals with disabilities. So if your project is specifically targeting this group of people, please make sure that you note it. Um, and please make sure that you tell us how you plan to attract that audience, how you plan to attract this group of people. Next is expected attendance or usage. Um, so if you have a public event, how many people do you think will show up? If it's not a public event, how many people do you think will benefit from it? Um, how many people do you think will use your digital archive? How many people do you think will watch your documentary on YouTube? Um, and that is kind of the big narrative sections, um, where you do a lot of your explaining and you employ all those tips and tricks in these narrative sections. The next is just a lot of technical stuff. So, humanities experts. We do require that humanities experts are involved in the planning or presentation of a project funded by us. Um, that does not mean they have to be a professor. It does not mean they have to be somebody with a formal education that is specialized. They can be one of those, but they can also be anybody with experience or any kind of education that is non-traditional. You could have village elders, tribal chiefs, traditional knowledge keepers, anybody who within a community has an expertise or specialized education within a humanities field. So we do ask that you describe each individual's area of knowledge and what role they will play, and indicate who it has or has not been confirmed. It's totally fine if some of them haven't been confirmed, if one of two of them haven't been confirmed, but we would like to see at least one confirmed. Next is the expert resume and biography. You have to put the biography or resume of anyone who is your content expert and anyone who will be paid with Delaware Humanities funds. Anybody who will be paid with Delaware Humanities funds has to have their resume or biography attached, or I will email you until I get it. Nobody wants to get more emails, so please make sure they are attached. Next is cost share personnel. So that is anyone who is involved but is not being paid with Delaware Humanities funds. You can pay them yourself by your organization. They can be volunteers, they can be staff. Just list them here to make sure we know who they are. And also kind of for the recording of cost share later. And the last section here is contingency plans. If something happens, what do you plan to do? If there's a COVID-19 outbreak, if there's a hurricane, if there's a flood, if there's a blizzard, if your project personnel changes, if your project director up and quits, what do you do? This is where we just want to know what your contingency plans are. Are you going to move online? Are you going to cancel it and reschedule it? Are you going to run around in circles and panic? This is where you let us know, preferably not if it's the last one. If it's run around in panic, what do you do after you run around in panic? So, the kind of second to last section, but really the last section, is budget and supporting documents. I'm about to show you the budget form in just a minute, but we do have a template that you have to save to your computer, complete, and use. You have to use the template. I have made it so easy, or at least what I think is so easy, and I'm gonna walk you through it. Don't worry. Don't panic. So there's also a sample form if you need guidance. And as a reminder, anyone who is listed under the personnel section of the budget must have a biography or resume provided. If you are out of space for biography or resumes, you can email it to me and I will attach it to your grant application myself. We will not be able to provide funding for the costs of individuals who do not have biographies provided. And if that means you requested $5,000 and 500 of it was for someone who you don't have a resume for, you might be awarded $4,500 with the note that you cannot pay that person, at least not with Delaware Humanities funding. If you want to pay them yourself, that's your prerogative. So the next section in here is the budget justification. So this is where you go line by line through the budget, and whatever we are paying for, you just have to write, this is what the line item is, this is how it's contributing to the event. So if it's an honorarium, you're like, this is the person who's talking, this is what they're talking about. If it's postage, this is postage. If it's the cost for a total amount of pieces, people in the case of travel, please note the cost per person. So if you're like, we need stamps and we're spending $100 on stamps, this is where you would note it's X amount of, I think it's 67 cents per stamp. And we need the stamps because we're mailing out these flyers. Or if you're printing 100 flyers and you say, we need 100 flyers because we're sending them to these locations. This is where you just tell us why you need the money and what that line item is doing for your organization and doing for the event, how it is contributing to that. It can be in a Word document, it can be in an Excel spreadsheet. I've seen people do it in the budget form and then they erase things out of the budget form and then put the justification in and then put the money back in. Um, you can do it any way you want. You can do it in a table, in a Word document, in Excel. If you're really desperate, you could draw it on a piece of paper. Don't recommend that, but you can. Most of the time people do it in Word documents though. We're not particularly picky about how you justify the budget as long as you do these three things. Next is the source of matching funds. So please note they all must have that one-to-one match. This is just how you tell us how you're making that cost share match. Um, and then you kind of check off on a list where you are getting it. In the event of an audit, we need to know the sources of your matching funds. Please check how you intend to get them for sponsor cash cost share. If it's an individual, corporation, public or private foundation, a labor union, affiliated groups, special events, or other or non-federal government. So the last one is external evaluators. So like I said earlier, there are certain things that can make you high risk. High risk does not mean that you are less likely to get a grant. It just means that there are some extra rules we have to follow. One of them is that you have to have an external evaluator assigned to you, and you will have to pay that external evaluator $200. You might be made high risk for any of the following four reasons. One, you're new and we've never worked with you before. Two, you have uncompleted follow-up paperwork or repeatedly missed follow-up paperwork deadline for previous subawards. This is the most common reason people are made high risk. Just for reference, the next one is changing the budget or usage of subaward funding without proper notification or prior financial or legal issues. So you are not allowed to make changes to your budget without notifying us in advance. This is because we can only fund certain things and we can only fund certain costs. So you are required to let us know in advance if you are making any changes to the budget. Um, I'll probably say yes if it's something we can fund, I'll most assuredly say yes. This is especially true for personnel changes because, as noted, all the way up here, all the way up here, anyone who will be paid with Delaware Humanities funds, we need their resume or biography. And this includes if you make changes to your form or changes to your budget or your project. And then everything else down here is signatures, and then a blank page apparently. So the project director is the person who will sign the grant agreement that we mail out. Um, they are required to sign it. If someone else needs to sign it, if the head of your organization needs to sign it, if a board member needs to sign it, I can add another line to the grant agreement. But because the project director is the one ultimately held responsible, they do have to be the one to sign it. Um, Before I quickly show you what the budget form looks like in a sneak peek, are there any questions about the application? All right. If you're typing in the chat, don't worry about it. I will answer it. I'm going to move on to the budget. One of these is the budget. I have about 1,000 tabs open at any given point. There it is. All right, so this is the Excel sheet. This is our budget. Our budget has 2 pages. The first page is instructions, which is just how to. Um, so this will give you information for every single tab. And then down here it says instructions and budget. Budget. This is what our budget form looks like. This is the one you fill out. This is an example budget. So if you have, a guest speaker and they have a $200 honorarium. So you would fill in $200, and if you want Delaware Humanities to pay for $100 of it, and you're paying for $100, you would enter 100 and 100. We try to make this as intuitive and easy as possible. Anything that you are paying for goes here in these sides. The total cost of it goes here. How much you want Delaware Humanities to pay for it goes here, and how much you are paying for it, either cash or in kind or through other gifts, goes here in these sections. These things total automatically. So do these. So you don't have to do any math. We make the computer do all the math for you because we're humanities people, not math people. And then all the way down here is the total contributions. So in this example, you see all of these things down here, and it equals $5,000 here. And then it says that the subrecipient is providing a total of $7,140. This number always has to equal or be bigger than this number because this is how much you're putting forward. So for the one-to-one cost share, it either has to equal or be higher than this number. This number has to match the amount that you are requesting. If it does not match the amount that you are requesting, something has to change. Either this number or the amount that you're requesting. If this number is higher than 5,000 for an opportunity grant, this number has to change, which means a number in here has to change. But this is just what the budget form looks like. It is as unscary as we can make it. It is also colorblind safe. There any questions about the budget? I will not judge you. Math is scary. All right, fantastic. So here is the question two. So if I switch over here, will it show me the PowerPoint again? Are we looking at the PowerPoint?
Yes, it's PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you. Again, me versus technology. So for the last 10-ish minutes, which is I think the most on track that this has ever been, because I talk a lot, is the post-award requirements. So say you did all of this, you filled out the budget form, you braved the math, you filled out all of those questions, you did a great job, you got that fantastic email that comes automated from Foundant that says, "Congratulations, you received a Delaware Humanities Award. Now what?" So for an opportunity grant, you have 2 follow-up forms. For an action innovation grant, you have a lot more. This is before, this is after. Opportunity, you have 1 before your project, you have 1 after your project. For action innovation, you have 2 to 3 before your project and 2 after your project. As easy as it can possibly be. So for opportunity, the first one is cash request and promotional information. Promotional information is an important one. Like I said earlier, we require all of our grants to have a recognition of the funding provided by Delaware Humanities. This is where you get the information about what you have to say, and you get PNGs of our logo to put on things. This is also where if you need any help putting together advertisements, if you need any help advertising on social media, we would be more than happy to share your posts on social media. We have a template that our grantees can use that you can slap your name and your project in and your logo in and a picture, and it makes a really nice social media picture. It's something that we can give you to use, no problem. If you need any help with things like that, that is something we are more than happy to do to help promote it. Um, that is kind of one of the important post-award requirements. If I see your advertisement and our logo is not on it, again, you will get an email from me. And nobody wants more emails. So the other important one is the cash request. We do not just hand you a check for $5,000 or mail you a check for $5,000 when you're awarded a grant. There is a form that you download called the cash request form, where you just fill in your organization address and your email address and how much of your money you are requesting. You cannot pull a fast one on me and try to request more than you are awarded. It does have to be the amount that you are awarded or less. If you are allowed to, if you have not been made high risk, you can request up to 100% upfront. I suggest you request 100% upfront because it's easier for everyone involved if you do so, if you are able to request 100% upfront. And then you just click the submit button, you upload it, you click the submit button, and it goes right to me. We make all of our grant payments through bill.com. If you have not been paid through bill.com before, you will receive an email once I input your information for you to sign up and make an account. Please use an account with an email address. Please make an account with an email address that is accessible to your organization. If it is a personal or private one, it can be difficult. If you ever leave that organization, bill.com makes it a bear to change an email address. I actually don't think they can change email addresses. I think they make you just make a new account. Or you have to like do it weirdly, like send them an email to say that you want to change your email address. It is wildly difficult. Bill.com is also how you get set up for direct deposit. We can do direct deposit with the grant money, but you do have to input all of the banking information for your organization. We can't see any of your banking information on our end. We can't see any of it. But that does mean if there is a mistake in it, we can't see it and we can't fix it. So please make sure all of the information that you are entering is correct and up to date. It is the exact same on the Action Innovation Grant, by the way. These forms are basically the same. For Opportunity Grant, that is the only form you have to fill out before your project or before your program starts. And then there's only one that you have to fill out after your program is over. It's the data summary, project evaluation, and financial documentation. This has 3 parts. The data summary and project evaluation are just, so how did it go? How many people showed up? Did they have a good time? Did you succeed your goal? Did you succeed in meeting the objectives that you set forth? It's how many people showed up? How many people used it? Did you have to make any changes? If so, what changes? That is just where you tell us how it went and if there's any changes you would like to make to it in the future. Never think that if something happened and you were like, man, I wish that we would have done that differently. Never think that if you put that in the what would you do differently moving forward section, that we wouldn't fund you in the future because it didn't go perfectly. we believe in kind of continually improving. And if anything, it just shows how dedicated you are to continual improvement. Recognizing what could be better the next time you do it and recognizing what do you need to do moving forward. It is never going to be a detriment to you to recognize when things could be better moving forward. The last part of that follow-up form is the financial documentation. So there is a budget form that looks exactly identical to the first budget form, that is called the final budget reconciliation. So the budget form is how much do you think things are about to cost? And the final budget reconciliation is so how much did it actually cost? So that is just where you tell us how much things actually cost, what the money was spent on kind of in the final stages. Um, and if any changes had to be made, I would have documented them on your grant application, kind of on the back end, so that I know when I look at your reconciliation form that any changes were approved. This is also where I catch your unapproved changes. So if any changes are unapproved and end up on the reconciliation form. That is the kind of before and after for opportunity. For action innovation, there is another thing called the evaluation plan that also happens before your project. That is, how do you plan to evaluate your project? What are you going to be looking for? How are you going to evaluate it? What are you going to do? That is one of the kind of important ones because we want to know how a year from now are you going to be evaluating your project? When it is all said and done, what are you going to be doing? This middle one is called the progress form. The progress form is only given to high risk action innovation awardees. And that is because we want to check in midway through. So the progress form is actually due halfway through kind of your project to check in and see how it's going. You know, if you need any help, if you need any assistance, if you need to make any changes. It is not like a punishment. It is not us being like, you are not on target. You are not kind of completing things to where we can take something away from you. It is so that we know what support we can give you and what help we can give you. And then the last two forms are the data summary and project evaluation and the final budget, broken up into two forms. This is because while opportunity grants only need one person, action innovation grants need two. You need a project director and a financial director. The financial director cannot be you. It has to be someone within your organization who is not you. It can be a board member. It can be another staff member. It can be anything of the sort. So I'm going to go into this, which has my contact information. It also has a list of, oh gosh, no. Okay. It has my contact information. It also has a list of other grants that are available, like the Delaware Division of the Arts, the Delaware Preservation Fund, and the Historic Revitalization grants. This is my email, and this is my direct line. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email, you can send me a phone call. Like I said, to the registrants, I'm going to be providing a recording of this, slides, any additional information. But in the 2 minutes we have left, does anybody have any questions? I know I talk really fast, so if you do, please feel free to ask.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Um, or actually maybe two. So if I have a project that I'm really interested in probably applying for an opportunity grant for. If I want to talk that through with you just a little bit before I even start all of the application forms, can I just email you and set up a time to do that? Is that okay? Or
Yes, absolutely. I also have a booking page that I can send you a link to, which is
okay.
if you want to set up a 30-minute meeting with me, it'll show you my calendar and you can just pick a time slot.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So if I email you and ask for that, that'd be fabulous. And then I work at the University of Delaware.
Mhm.
And what is the policy about F&A? Um, because the university often charges it, but does Delaware Humanities have a rule against F&A funds?
We don't have a rule against it. I
Okay,
believe we are allowed to fund it up to, and the number just changed.
okay,
Um, Sierra, if you can remember, Sierra's the deputy director, by the way. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce you at the beginning of this.
No, that's fine. And what was the question again? I'm sorry.
I'm wondering about F&A.
And the indirect costs.
Yeah, indirect costs.
The number
Oh,
just changed.
I think it is still 10.
Is it still 10,
10%?
like
I think it's
10%?
still 10. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
can cover up to 10% of the award. So it would be up to $500 for an opportunity grant at maximum.
Awesome. Okay. Great.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah, those are my two questions. Thanks.
All
I
right,
really,
perfect. Yeah,
all right. You'll hear from me soon.
of course. I'm so excited.
Okay.
Um, I'm so glad this was helpful.
Yeah, very much.
No problem. Um, I am very happy to explain this. I'm so glad this was helpful, Natalie. Um, Billy, I am so glad that it makes you more comfortable with the process, and that if anybody is made kind of more comfortable for the grant application process from this, I am very, very happy. We do this twice a year as an effort to make it as transparent as possible. Because we do not want it to be scary, and we know it can come across as a very scary process. And we want people to be comfortable, and we want to be as transparent as we can be. Um, I don't want to keep you all too long with my kind of schmoozy talking, so I'm going to be sending out an follow-up email with my contact information, with the slides, with the recording, and with my booking page as well. If you want to talk more about projects, more specific, or if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to reach out. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day. All right. Stop this and
Yeah.